And we're back on AM 1460, the new WXBR. Peter Czymbor and Mike Pava here with you on this Monday morning. This Saturday night, live from Las Vegas, the biggest event of the year to take place in the sport of boxing thus far, as pound-for-pound kingpin Floyd Mayweather looks to unify junior middleweight world titles with undefeated Mexican Canelo Alvarez. And a part of the broadcast team for that event, produced by Showtime, will be the man that joins us right now via the telephone. Joining us once again is Al Bernstein. Al, welcome back to the program.
Good to be with you guys.
Al, last time we had you on the show was prior to Floyd Mayweather taking on Robert Guerrero, which by all accounts was a successful showtime for you and your colleagues at Showtime. Congratulations on that. And while we did not outright discount Robert Guerrero's chances of beating Floyd Mayweather in that fight, we were already looking ahead to Floyd Mayweather taking on Canelo Alvarez down the road. I don't think we expected it, or many people who follow the sport of boxing expected this to happen so quickly. Why is Floyd Mayweather fighting Canelo Alvarez right now?
There's probably a couple different factors. One, I think, is commerce. I think he reasoned that this was the fight that would be most likely to do good business. It would be the fight that would be most likely to continue a certain excitement that he wanted to have as he moved on in this last arc of his career. And I think he saw Canelo fight Austin Trout, and he just determined, well, he's young and he's going to get better. I'm 36, and I don't want to be fighting him in the fifth fight of this deal, maybe. I'd rather be fighting him right now. And I think probably some of those things had to do with it.
The last time there was a Floyd Mayweather fight out there that everyone wanted to see, it simply didn't happen, or at least hasn't happened yet, and that would be Floyd Mayweather against Manny Pacquiao. And any time Floyd was asked about fighting Manny Pacquiao, it was always, of course I'll fight him, but, and it was either A, an issue over money, or B, an issue over steroid testing. And even when it seemed like Manny Pacquiao had agreed on certain terms that would be in Floyd's favor, he would still bring them up in interviews. What is it about Canelo Alvarez that you think Floyd sees in his style that he thinks suits to his favor?
Well, I think look, there's two things that went on here. One, there were political issues, if you will. He had a very acrimonious relationship with Bob Arum, who's Manny Pacquiao's promoter, and that didn't help matters. And there were that was a much harder fight to make than this one. And Canelo is also promoted by Golden Boy Promotions, which is the lead promoter on these days on Floyd Mayweather's fights. And so it wasn't as hard a fight to make. And I think part of the reason, as I said, why he's in the ring, that he thinks this fight's advantageous right now, or at least is doable, even though he's fighting the biggest, strongest man he's ever fought, and they are fighting at 152 pounds, which is high for him. It's a 154-pound fight, but at a catchweight. And that's an interesting story, too, because everybody assumes that Mayweather asked for the catchweight. His manager and the main consultant, Leonard Ellerby, swears that it was the Canelo people that first brought it up. And so if you need a catchweight, he'll fight at 152, which they hadn't even asked for. And, of course, once it was on the table, he said, this is Ellerby speaking, that they took it. But even so, Mayweather's fighting a guy who's going to end up coming in the ring, 12, 13 pounds heavier than him for sure, and is a natural 154-pounder who probably in the next 3 or 4 years will move up to 160. So he's facing a very big fighter. But I think Mayweather determined that there were certain things that he could do now at this point in his career with Alvarez that he thought it was worth the risk to fight him.
I want to talk about this fight between Mayweather and Alvarez in depth in just a moment, and I'm not trying to bring everything back to Manny Pacquiao, but I think that with Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao, there's been such a story arc of their careers thus far that people ultimately saw that they were going to meet that hasn't happened yet, that I have to ask this question. You mentioned moments ago that you think the reason why Mayweather versus Alvarez is happening right now is due to commerce. How much of the market value of Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao fights, for that matter, has diminished to some degree since Manny Pacquiao has lost back-to-back fights, including one by crushing knockout to Juan Manuel Marquez, where the luster of a Mayweather-Pacquiao super fight doesn't seem quite high as it once was. Therefore, Floyd can't seem to fight guys like Robert Guerrero and do millions-plus pay-per-view buys at this point. He has to go after the biggest and best fight to garner people's interest.
Well, yeah, he does. He has to fight. Sometimes you can't carry the B-side over. We had right around 1 million buys for or Showtime did for the last fight, but it takes two to tango, and Robert Guerrero was not a super well-known figure to the casual boxing fan or even the sports fan that is less than a casual boxing fan. Canelo Alvarez, look, this fight has gotten the stamp of approval from the mainstream media because at the end of the day, I'll sound like a Republican presidential candidate here bashing the media, but at the end of the day, it's the mainstream media that determines whether the casual boxing fan is going to tune in or be interested in a fight. Mayweather can bring some of that on his own, clearly, just like Oscar De La Hoya used to do it. But because boxing isn't covered very well, it's up to the mainstream media to say a match is acceptable to the masses. And that's what they have done, in effect, with this Alvarez fight for a variety of reasons. And so I think Mayweather understood that and knew this would be marketable. The Pacquiao fight here's the problem with the Pacquiao fight is that there were always barriers to making it happen, and then Manny Pacquiao ended up losing twice, even though certainly the Bradley fight, most people would think he won. And Manny Pacquiao just took a half step back as a fighter. Listen, he's been fighting for so long, and Manny Pacquiao had two parts of a storied career. The first part, which of course most of the mainstream media ignores because they don't even know it happened, was when he was a great fighter in the featherweight division and lower than that, facing Eric Morales and Marco Antonio Barrera and Juan Manuel Marquez when he was smaller. That alone puts him in the Hall of Fame. Forget everything else. Those series of fights were as good as Hearns, Hagler, Leonard, and Duran. Then the second part of the career was when he moved up in weight, and that's what sparked everybody to, Mayweather included, to think, there's performance-enhancing and drugs around, which I don't know if there is or there isn't. But whatever the case, he was very successful at these higher weight classes. So, all of those confluence of events made the Pacquiao fight tough to make. It still has appeal, certainly, but this one has just as much, if not more, appeal.
We're chatting with Al Bernstein here on AM 1460, the new WXBR. He'll be broadcasting Floyd Mayweather versus Canelo Alvarez on a Showtime-produced pay-per-view this Saturday night, live from Las Vegas. Al, what chances do you give Canelo Alvarez in this fight, and what attributes of Canelo Alvarez's fighting characteristics you think suit him well against a guy like Floyd Mayweather? We've already talked about the size.
Yeah, he has the ability. He's strong, and that's part of the size thing. But Canelo has something else too. He's a murderous body puncher, and if you're going to fight a 36-year-old who moves a lot and who is coming up in weight, you better be able to throw the body. Robert Guerrero had part of a game plan that we will see Canelo use. Guerrero was programmed that when Floyd Mayweather threw his lead right hand, which is his main weapon, he was immediately going to counter to the body with his left hand, which he did. Mayweather throws the right and then immediately moves to his right. You have to throw the body shot to kind of keep him there, or that's the thing that he's vulnerable to. Now, Guerrero is not a monstrous body puncher. He's also a lefty, so his left hand was farther back. Alvarez is a righty, and Canelo punches with twice as much power to the body. So I think his body work is one thing, and also his combination punching. He's a better combination puncher than anybody, I think, gives him credit for, and quicker hands. So it's possible if he can put Mayweather on the ropes, which is very difficult to do, but Mayweather sometimes does it to himself, that Canelo may be able to with his combination punchings, be a little bit better. And he also gives himself punching room. A lot of fighters smother themselves when they get someone on the ropes. It's when they get Mayweather on the ropes. De La Hoya did it. Even Miguel Cotto, who's successful, did it. So there are some things about Canelo that certainly, along with the size and the youth, give him, I think, a chance to do some good in this fight.
We're chatting with Al Bernstein here on AM 1460, the new WXBR. You mentioned Canelo Alvarez, youth, just 22 years old, yet 40-plus fights. For those that don't know, he is Mexican, and in Mexico, you can turn professional in boxing at the age of 15. This guy has a wealth of experience, despite the fact that he's barely of drinking age in the United States.
Yeah, it's interesting. 7-year veteran of the sport, just about. And while those fights are not on the level of this is his first mega fight. Although against Austin Trout, in his last fight that we had on Showtime, he drew 38,000 people to the Alamo Dome, and that had big fight written all over it. But this is still on another level. But with all that experience, that's helpful to him, especially being young. So he's got the best of both worlds. He's young and has all the attributes of youth and advantages of youth. Plus, he is already, kind of a veteran.
Canelo Alvarez, in his early fights in Mexico, if you look down his record, he actually fought in some bouts in 4-rounders with guys who would later go on to win world titles. What is the level of boxing like in Mexico amongst these teenagers fighting on these club shows that some do rise to prominence?
Oh, well, it's very good, and that's part of the reason why that beginning for you is, if you can come through relatively unscathed. In fact, Rafael Marquez, a great champion from Mexico, in his very first fight, he fought a former champion in like a 6 or 8 round fight and lost. And of course, later on, Rafael Marquez, the brother of Juan Manuel Marquez, went on to be a legendary fighter. So that shows you, for the Mexican fighters, that sometimes they will face these terrible tests early in their career, either from somebody that either was a great champion or is going to be. And the question is how you get through those. Now, boxing's now a more forgiving sport with losses. It's, I think, a lesson learned from MMA. But at one time, if you didn't reel off 20, in this case, Canelo is undefeated, which speaks well of him. But if you didn't reel off 30 wins in a row, somehow people thought you were defective if you had 2 losses, which is not the case.
There are stories out there about fighters like Julio Cesar Chavez, a Mexican boxing icon, and even guys like Canelo Alvarez, where they look at their record and say, well, I've actually got more. They're just not documented. What is the documentation-like process in commissions and whatnot in Mexico? How valid are these fights?
Well, I think they document it. It's just a question of whether nowadays with the computer records and everything, I think most of the fights are going to get documented now. Not so much in previous times, both certainly in Mexico and probably even places in the United States and other places. Now, I think you're more likely to get them documented, at some point.
We're chatting with Al Bernstein here on AM 1460, the new WXBR. Floyd, before I let you go, Al, before I let you go, I want to talk to you about some area boxers here in New England that are about to make a splash, or at least they hope so, on the big stage. We'll start off with super middleweight Edwin Rodriguez, who appears to be on the verge of a title shot after a first-round knockout over a fighter named Denis Grachev in Monte Carlo a few weeks back. It looks like his next fight will either be for the WBA Super Middleweight Championship against Andre Ward or against Saki Obika, the WBC Super Middleweight Champion. What do you think of Edwin Rodriguez from Worcester, Massachusetts' chances are of bringing home a world title, say, within the next 12 months?
Well, he's a very good fighter, that's for sure. And the 168-pound division is a really good division to be in many respects. Obviously, whether he brings home the title will depend greatly on which one of those champions he faces. Andre Ward, though coming off an injury, is, in my mind, one of the 2 or 3 best pound-for-pound fighters in the world today. If you're going to fight him, it's a good time to fight him coming off an injury when he's had a long layoff. But Ward is a tough nut to crack. Now, Saki Obika is a different story. We saw him in his last fight win his title, and he's not an easy fighter to fight. He's very awkward. He's got power, but I saw signs of erosion in Saki Obika in his last fight, and I think Edwin Rodriguez would have a pretty good chance of beating him. Because a good fighter is very good, and once you have a championship, the great Gil Clancy used to say, it makes you about a 20% better fighter. But that one would give, I think, Edwin Rodriguez his chance, and he is a very good fighter, and I think he's going to be a force in the super middleweight division for some time.
Saki Obika was involved in one of the best fights I've ever seen in my life, which took place here in Boston a few years back, that is almost forgotten about, and I don't know exactly why. I remember when Showtime did the Super 6 tournament, the big super middleweight tournament a few years back, a round-robin-style tournament, and someone put a list together of the best and biggest fights in the history of the super middleweight division, and they completely ignored the contender finale of Saki Obika versus Jadon Codrington, which took place here in Boston, which was one of the best fights I'd ever seen. I don't know why I bring that up, but boxing.
Yeah, no, well, and part of the reason they probably ignored it is because it was part of that series and not one of the regular sanctioned bouts. But yeah, Saki Obika, we had him in his last fight. It was a brawl. It was crazy, and he ended up winning. But he does get into those kind of fights.
The other area boxer I want to ask you about while I have time with you is Providence, Rhode Island's Demetrius Andrade. Unlike Edwin Rodriguez, who his next fight may be against one guy or another, it appears that Demetrius Andrade's next fight will be for the vacant WBO junior middleweight title against Vanes Martirosyan, who, like Demetrius Andrade, was a United States Olympian. What are Demetrius Andrade's chances of bringing home that belt, in your opinion?
Well, he also has a good chance to win the title. You know, he's a really good fighter. I mean, I think he's everybody I talk to in the world of boxing that has seen him on a regular basis, been around him both in terms of training and fighting, they're all impressed with him and all feel that he is ready to take the next step up. And Martirosyan is a really good fighter who has suffered some tough breaks. His fight with Lara, in which it was an ugly fight, difficult with clashes of heads and cuts and all the rest, didn't show him at his best. I think he and Andrade that's going to be a terrific fight. I think Demetrius certainly has a good chance to win that.
Well, Al, before I let you go, we'll bring it back to the big fight this weekend in Las Vegas. Floyd Mayweather taking on Canelo Alvarez. The promoter of this event, Golden Boy Promotions, is headed by former boxing champ Oscar De La Hoya. Oscar De La Hoya, in his bout with Floyd Mayweather in the year 2007, they sold 2.4 million buys on pay-per-view, by far and away the record for the highest-grossing pay-per-view boxing match in history. Oscar De La Hoya is saying that Mayweather versus Canelo Alvarez has the chance to supersede this in terms of pay-per-view buys. Is that plausible, or is that Oscar De La Hoya hyping his product?
Well, I think it is reasonable to expect, and I'm not an expert on these things, and others at both at Showtime and elsewhere could probably give you a more, a better feeling for it. But just in general, my feeling about this is it is very likely to be in the top several of pay-per-views ever, because there's a bigger universe now, and this fight has engendered huge attention and focus. As I pointed out, it's being covered better than a lot of fights are for the sport, and I think there is the possibility. Certainly, I mean, I think it's going to do very, very well. I don't, that record, I don't know. I mean, that was a confluence of events that came together and made it a perfect storm for that. This one certainly has great interest, and I think it's going to do a lot of fun. And by the way, one of the other charms of this card is that the undercard, as we had with Guerrero Mayweather, we had a great undercard, but this one's really good with Lucas Matisse taking on Danny Garcia. It is one of the most anticipated fights in boxing. Garcia holds two of the titles at the 140-pound weight limit, and Lucas Matisse, who is, by the way, a future opponent of Mayweather if Mayweather beats Canelo. Lucas Matisse has 32 knockouts in 34 fights. He's a monstrous puncher from Argentina and one of the most exciting fighters to watch. So I think that match for hardcore, avid boxing fans, and I hope for casual ones as well if they get to see them, will, that also adds to the dimensions of this.
It is rare that you do get another main event caliber fight on a pay-per-view undercard of the caliber of Mayweather Canelo Alvarez with Garcia versus Matisse.
Yeah, it is, and I think they did it for a variety of reasons. But when we did the last Mayweather Guerrero fight, all three of the fights leading up to it were terrific. But because Mayweather handled Guerrero, in a certain fashion, people kind of forgot that the undercard was absolutely spectacular. But the undercard's being better, and again, I'll refer back to MMA, where they've placed a big emphasis on trying to make every one of the fights special. And the other reason to make the undercard of these kind of fights great is this is when the casual fan is looking at boxing. You don't want them to see boxing in 2013 has had dozens and dozens of spectacular fights. This year, 2013, and I'm not a cheerleader for the sport. I cover it, but this is just in my mind, almost a factual statement. It's barely an opinion. 2013 has been the best product boxing has put out in 20 years. And boxing's been putting a very good product out since 2004, a really good product. It may get ignored frequently by the media, but this year it's been nothing short of spectacular. But when the casual fight fan who may not see those fights comes to look at the sport, you want that undercard to feature A, fighters that are important to the sport and are good, and B, you want good matchups. And I think that because you want them to look and say, wow, what have I been missing? Why am I not watching more boxing? And that's what the Matisse-Garcia fight kind of does.
Well, Al, you will have the best seat in the house ringside this Saturday night for Mayweather-Alvarez, undercard and all. Hope you enjoy your work, and thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Good to talk to you.
That's Al Bernstein joining us here on AM 1460, the new WXBR. We'll step aside for a quick break. Mike Pavid joins us from the WXBR newsroom.